Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. Frontier found themselves in a bit of a pickle this week after a group of players conducted an investigation into their policy on combat login. Now, what is combat login? Well, it's the process of ungracefully exiting from the game when at risk. For example, when a player comes under attack by another player, they may use task kill to close Elite. This then takes the player from out of the game because the game instantly removes ships from disconnected clients. Now, Frontier have said that this is an exploit and they have a policy against it and will ban anyone who repeatedly uses this. Commander Rinsler decided to investigate this policy of Frontier's and posted on Reddit an extensive account of the investigation along with its results. It's something that if you haven't seen yet, you can take a look at through the link on the video description below. But here is the quick version. And that Commander Rinsler conducted a sting operation along with a group of friends. Using multiple accounts, they set up a scenario which enabled them to capture documented evidence of combat login. This evidence was then submitted to Frontier and tracked via YouTube analytics. It seemed that ultimately Frontier closed the case without so much as an investigation, or at least according to the YouTube stats, where the video remained at 0 counts. Now, they probably do have their own internal investigations, but they certainly didn't appear to look at the evidence that had been submitted. Now, after some uproar, Frontier posted a statement acknowledging the situation, and they stated that whilst they always investigate cases of combat login and have a process in place for dealing with it, in these particular cases, and these only, they didn't follow through on that process. They apologised and assured it wouldn't happen again. Now, there was a mixed reaction, of course, to this statement, with many people accusing Frontier of just releasing a generic PR statement. So that's the issue with combat login that went down recently, and I don't really want to spend too much time in this video actually talking about combat login, but the situation has served to highlight once again the whole issue of PvP. So let's take a look at PvP along with open mode, and we'll start with why people like to play in open. Here's just a few points. It's a diverse environment. It's social. There are more players in open than any other game mode, and that includes Mobius. There's an opportunity to meet other people. It makes a game feel alive. There are people that can turn up at surprising moments and offer help. You never know what's going to happen next. And there's an ever-present sense of danger. And other players offer a risk and a challenge. It's these last few areas that seem to be the tipping point, the aspects that cause the most contention. Some people love the open environment, but they don't enjoy the risk. Why not just use Mobius or another private group then? Well, those groups are large for sure. In the case of Mobius, there are around 20,000 members. But bottom line is that open is larger, it's more diverse, and there is certainly an attraction to that. But player versus player is a massive component of today's games. And while some could fairly argue that Elite Dangerous wasn't originally pushed as a PvP focused game, the reality is that today PvP very much is a reality of the game, and it's something that a vast number of people deeply enjoy. And for many people, the player versus player element is the game. Frontier are currently in the process of putting in a new balance patch out for 2.2, an update that is going to go out to the beta servers to be tested out, and a huge part of this update is PvP centric. In fact, a huge amount of content released for Elite is indeed PvP centric. Ship launched fighters and most of the engineer mods are clearly amongst that. There are some arguments out there that suggest Frontier focused more on PvP than on any other aspect of the game, and the current weapons, power play and engineers balance passes would seem to support that. Now, combat is one of the three main pillars of the game, so it makes sense it gets a lot of attention. Meanwhile though, both trading and exploration, the other two of the three main pillars of the game, remain completely undeveloped and have barely changed since the game's release. Trading doesn't really rely on understanding the markets and making the best use of them. There are, after all, a ton of low-value products that no one would ever trade. They seem to have no real use. Trading then, within Elite, currently could perhaps be better termed as hauling. Likewise, exploration has very little gameplay associated with it. Simply put, honking the discovery scanner and pointing your ship at a planet to wait for a few seconds for the details. Sure, explorers spend plenty of time out there looking for many wonderful areas the game offers, and I've spent countless hours doing that myself, but in terms of pure gameplay mechanics, there is nearly nothing there to support the exploration. Combat, on the other hand, continues to have a lot of development, and it's something that Frontier are keen to get right. At the end of the day, I can only assume that as Frontier have access to all the metrics regarding the types of gameplay the majority get involved in, then this would result in them putting most of their development focus on areas of the game that the most of the people use. So to be honest, there's little room to doubt that combat is a major aspect of the game for many people. It'll be very interesting though to see the stats that show how many people play PvP compared to PvE. But even without these official figures, I think it's reasonable to assume that PvP accounts for a significant segment of combat related activities. So what is the appeal of PvP then? And why does it cause so many problems? Well, this is a tough question, and it's one I wouldn't even pretend to actually be able to answer. The problem is though, that PvP is the aspect that causes the most contention for open mode, and it's the most cited reason for combat logging. So the best I can do then is take a bit of a look at some of this. There's a tendency from some to look at both PvP and PvE from an angle of psychology, and whilst I'm a great enthusiast for understanding the human mind, it's not going to help here to do armchair psychoanalysis. Doing this often tends to lead to words such as crybaby, forum dads, care bear, murder, sociopath, and all manner of other nonsense. And yes, let's call it what it is, nonsense from all camps. Of course, there are bound to be outliers there, probably quite a few, where there are indeed a few psychotic players out there and a few with the extreme sensitivities, but for the purpose of this video I want to just look at what people enjoy and what they hate about PvP. So with this in mind, I created a thread on Reddit asking people what they enjoy about PvP. And you know what? This happens to have been one of the most enlightening reads I've ever had on Elite Dangerous. Some truly amazing posts in there, and I really do appreciate everyone taking the time to post their thoughts and their stories. And I'll post a link below to the thread so you can all go and have a look and check that out for yourself. It's something I highly recommend you go and do. So naturally, there are a ton of different reasons as to why people enjoy PvP, and very few of them focus on making life a misery for their target. That said, there's clearly a dissonance between people who want PvP and those who don't. It's almost like a cultural difference, each group coming from a very different world, and each not really understanding the other's perspective. For this reason, many games take the easy route and set up separate PvE and PvP servers. World of Warcraft is a great example of this. And then a few games take the slightly more complex route of setting up safe areas. EVE Online is a good example of this. Frontier seem to have created a hybrid of sorts with mode switching, but even with that in place, many people have an understandable desire to experience the full version of Elite. Simply put, open mode has access to the largest community, but that naturally means the widest possible diversity of playstyles. Now, I'll admit that I've often struggled to understand PvP. I come from a background of single-player games or games of a cooperative nature. I played Ultima Online back at the end of the 90s and enjoyed the free-for-all world of full PvP before it was split, but I didn't engage in PvP. I struggled to understand the PvP mindset, and more often than not, my PvP friends conversely struggled to understand why I had no interest in the activity. But ultimately, today in Elite, there are many different reasons, genuine reasons, to enjoy PvP, and I'll highlight a few of those reasons here, but bullet points don't really do the activity justice. If it's something you don't really understand, then do like I did, take a few minutes to read up on why people enjoy the activity, and have a look at the Reddit thread. So some of the reasons include the following. It's natural endgame content. PvE doesn't offer much in the way of significant challenge, and players are unpredictable and pose a risk. It takes significant skill to master. Some say there is no ceiling to the skill level there and that you are constantly learning. Playing deeply within the world as an agent of the Empire or Federation and looking for other targets of the opposition. PvP forces you to overcome your natural instincts to flee. It really does make you look at yourself and your own skill set. Pirating players is interesting because the situation is always dynamic and unpredictable. Now I'm sure there are many people out there that will completely disagree with all of that, but give them a chance, bear with me for a minute and have a think about it. After all, we all play games to engage in fantasy, for escapism and to gain the feelings we might not otherwise be able to gain in the real world. Sometimes that is a sense of awe, sometimes it's a sense of deep exploration, or the feeling of being rich and powerful. Now arguably, the equally valid fantasies to engage in are the feeling of power and domination over others, as well as to take what belongs to someone else to make your own ends meet. Now we can't judge these actions on their surface alone, because we don't know who is behind the screen. We cannot and perhaps should not psychoanalyze these situations, and even if we do, that doesn't lead to any useful fixes for the game. This isn't the only side of PvP though. The other side is equally as valid and is as equally deserving of respect and understanding. There is the notion that those who don't like PvP should not play in open mode, but the reality is that they do play in open mode. This is of course a point of contention, but it really shouldn't be looked at as an area that is wrong or suffers from cognitive dissonance. Elite, after all, is a very broad game with many different playstyles. Again, bullet pointing at those styles doesn't do them justice. However, here are a few of them. Feeling a part of a truly massive world that at times can feel very alive when in open. The steady and hard accumulation of wealth and assets can feel more rewarding when achieved in open. Travelling through the vast areas of space makes the occasional social interaction feel unique. Moving from one side of the galaxy to the other takes significant time, which adds to the sense of scale. And meeting another player out there in the black really can be very meaningful indeed. Now these are great reasons to enjoy Elite, and whilst the reasoning for these are applicable both in solo and private, they are just as valid in open, where an additional depth can be added to the game. Elite is a game which takes significant time investment. Many people measure their progress by what they have achieved within a set time frame, and losing it can feel a very strong blow. This is made worse when that loss is at the hands of another player, and it leads to some very valid observations. PvP at the moment is very unbalanced, especially since the release of engineers. After all, not everyone has access to heavily modified ships. Some people struggle to earn money and rebuy costs are very high. There's often no to little risk to the aggressor. PvP leaves people feeling that they have no option but to quit, combat log, or ultimately play in solo. It's all too easy to throw mud at people. It's easy to make the PvPer out to be the psychotic wolf and the lone trader out to be the crybaby. It's easy to shout accusations of cheater. These are the words we often read from comments on YouTube, forums and Reddit, and they're an expression of frustration. The internet isn't known for balanced and reasoned comments. It's a chamber that generally leads to shouting and insults. So it's hard to judge the situation based on half-crazed, angry comments. Ultimately, the blame game isn't going to solve anything. The PvPers feel ostracized by the community. The PvEers and solo players feel like the unwitting targets and clubbed seals. It seems to me as though Frontier have designed an awesome football field, invited players, only to have American football players and soccer players both turn up on the same field. Now, of course, there are a few, and maybe even a lot, of extreme players out there that go beyond all a sense of reasoning. There are the cold-hearted gankers out there and the newbie killers. There are the players who go around in huge ships to kill sidewinders. And there's the suicide winders and the station griefers. And of course, there are the players out there that get a little too upset at losing their ship. But are these really the bulk of the players who play the game? Those few may be loud, they may be very visible, but out of the hundreds of thousands of logins per week that the game has, are those extreme people really a large percentage of the total? Elite is a massive game. It appeals to a broad set of playstyles and age groups. Are we really going to sit here and blame those groups for their various playstyles? Are we going to judge the wider group based on the actions of a few extreme idiots? The comments we see on both sides of the argument, I believe, are born from frustration. Expressions come from a situation which hasn't yet been resolved. Personally, I feel the ball is very much in Frontier's court. They have designed the game, they are the ones with the power to change it, and they are undoubtedly aware of this issue. But it seems that for now at least, they are unsure of how to fix it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.